wholeness. Uh, it's going to be another one of those storytelling videos. I go by Sly or just Nobody. And I'm going to tell the story of the quarter-ounce dose of mushrooms that led me to quit psychedelics and quit smoking weed for nearly a year. Now, it wasn't because something in the trip really scared me, or rather, in my mind, I didn't paint it that way, because I don't separate any experience from another. But to dive into this story, I first have to sort of illustrate where I was at when it was happening. I was living with the same three people that I was living with in my last trip report that I did on DMT. And I had been kind of abstinent from everything for about a month and a half, and then recently, before this trip, I had taken a smaller dose, and it was really just a normal day. So I remember thinking, it wasn't just a normal day, it was that nothing super crazy or out of the ordinary happened. So I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna have to set myself up a little more rigorously. Part of this was that I had tripped closer to the new moon that first time, and then closer to the full moon I tripped again. But what really created the foundation for this experience was I developed an obsession with what you would call yoga of the mind. Now, yoga of the mind is a sort of rigorous form of sadhana where you do almost nothing but just sit or lay and observe. And I began this practice with simply just sitting in my recliner in the apartment I had lived in before this and meditating. And over time, see, I was, in the same way that I was a fool, I wasn't a fool. I was always willing to jump over the edge, but never willing not to climb, or to not climb back up, which meant to me that these doorways, these medicines which we use as a sort of catapult, I couldn't keep. So I knew that I had to integrate these states of mind into my waking life, which I did, but it really took me years to do it properly. And it wasn't that the yoga didn't work, it was that there were certain things in the process that I wasn't ready to face. And I had to sort of get my ass handed to me by life in order to come around and face them. So on this day, over a course of 2 months, I had basically upgraded. I had been meditating almost daily for over 6 months. But in the course of the previous 2 months, that year of the June and July, I was meditating anywhere from 3 hours to 8 hours every single day. I put in a shift. I put in one whole shift every single day. And at the time, I was working mornings too. So I would go in, I would go into the freezer of this Taco Bell, and I would basically, and I'm a skinny guy. At the time, I probably weighed like 125. And I would basically do whatever nobody wanted to do. I was like the mule. And it put me through a lot of pain and hurt and stress, and it wasn't fair on me, but it definitely set me up physically to really take this, how you say, high blood pressure jump. To just run with my eyes closed. So I did. Rather, I didn't run. I was running my mind. And as I come into this state of every day being able to literally vibrate through my hands on command, and it almost felt like I would start to vibrate this field that was outside of me until it grew and vibrated faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And I would do this for hours and 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 hours. Because I knew that it wasn't so simple as you see the answer and then you're set and then you walk off into the sunset and it's the end of the movie. That's not how this works. There's training, rigorous training behind everything, every talent, every skill. And I knew that. So I was every single day meditating. I was creating a skill for awareness. And by this time, I was already inundated and very well versed in the concepts of I am that I am, and why am I? I forget, one of my favorite lines was if I am I, and you are I. If I refer to myself as I, and you refer to yourself as I, but you refer to me as you, and I refer to you as you. And who am I? Who am I? And the answer was obvious to me, but I just love to ask that question because people who wanted to argue with me like, oh, you're just a spiritual little shitbag. So I would ask them a question. And they would always be like, you were breaking my brain. So this day I wake up and I probably meditated for 2 hours. I remember not having work that day. And this was, I mean, everything. All the visuals and psychic energies and interdimensional beings, and it was just not what you would expect. So I actually had LSD too. So I took a gummy of LSD and I took 7 grams of mushrooms after 2 hours of meditation on a 528 hertz pure tone. This is what I used every single day. I would use it as a tuning fork for the rest of my body. I would listen to this tone. I would let it vibrate my inner ears, and then it would vibrate through my body, and I would memorize the vibration, and then I would sustain the vibration. And I did it over and over and over and over and over again. And in my meditations sober, I would come out of these meditations, and in the first 30 minutes of walking around, everything would be vibrating. It was just like taking one hit of DMT. It was like that first threshold, and I was crossing over into it without ever having to take any drugs. But I knew there was more. Something inside of me, see, I had a burning desire to do something for the world. I was every day meditating and every single day manifesting, and I could see my manifestations out in the reality, but I wasn't thinking of myself. Part of the reason for that was because I wasn't ready to. But also part of the reason for this was because I knew that the real work lied in the collective. So really the foundation of my meditations was vibrating with love and sharing that faith and sharing it everywhere, sending it out in all directions. And it was a struggle because you could clearly see that it was being received, but there were things going on in the reality which constantly wobbled it out of place. And I had to keep going. And I never stopped. So I take these mushrooms and I go right back down into my meditation. 7 grams. By this point, eating dry mushrooms and coming up, not a stranger to it at all. And I knew best thing to do was to meditate all the way through the come up. So I did. I'm not sure how long exactly. It might have been an hour or 2 hours. And when I came out of it, I mean, I had an instinct to come out of my meditation at some point where I was hitting all the bells and I was doing my thing, emanating. And I opened my eyes and I knew immediately, get up right now. Right fucking now. So the first thing I do is go outside and smoke a cigarette. But really it was just me leading myself outside with a cigarette, a little carrot on the stick, because I'm in this state where I'm going to get it done no matter what it is, and I'm going to find a way. No way my ego is going to get in front of me. I was working it hard. And I go outside, and on this day, the fires were very prevalent. I remember the sun was dark blood red, and I looked out on the space between the apartment building across from ours and my own at our porch, just separated by a fence, and there's a row of plants. And I remember the smoke was so thick that you could see the haze from the beginning of the row of plants to the end. And you could see just how gray everything was the further back that you looked. And I go outside, I look around, and I just have this feeling like I am standing on like a wire. Like I am standing on the pin needle of a wire that's being precariously balanced on its own pin needle end on a table. And that if I moved my soul, my consciousness, my awareness, even just a cork, I would fall. And the terror of this was very real. As I was looking out onto these plants and at the smoke, and immediately I don't say anything. I mean, it took me maybe 30 seconds to go through all of these thoughts. It was quick. And I kind of look around for a few seconds, and I'm actually moving my body kind of like this, like constantly keeping things in motion, being sure not to be perfectly still, because I felt as though I had hit a threshold where if I went any further, I would no longer be able to use my body in the way that I was. Kind of like how people blast off. But there was some part of me that said, I'm not going to go into that separation of, there's hyperspace and space is falling behind or into the physical or whatever. It was all one. And I was feeling the presence of many things, but it's almost like when you go into the woods and you know there are creatures around, but they're not trying to fuck with you. They don't want to hang. They don't know what's going on. They hear a human. They're like, what the fuck? There's a fucking human in my woods. I'm about to back off, dude. And that's kind of how it felt. But more so, it felt like all these beings that you might normally encounter in a trip were just like, whoa, we don't need to talk. I'm out. And I was just in this very clear space. I felt as though nothing could push my alignment or pull it or do anything to the way that I was being in these moments. And mind you, I'm only like 5 minutes into my actual trip. I mean, I spend the whole come up meditating. But this is only like 5 minutes. I go outside, I'm looking around, it takes me a couple minutes to process. And instinctually, I hit the door behind me, out front, down the stairs, and I'm on my way to the park across the street. And the way that I'm walking is with my arms out. And at the time, my arms and my shoulders were perfectly flowing together. And the way that I would walk, it felt like flying. It felt like walking on water, just walking on pavement. But it felt like walking on water. And I also noticed that every person I came within distance of started to go like this. And it's funny because I would see this like constantly. Maybe a block away from my apartment, I see two people do it. I'm across the street, halfway to the park, I see a couple more people do it. I get to the park, and every person I walk by is literally like, the fuck? And I kind of over and over again, I would just slowly turn, or I wouldn't turn at all. And I would keep walking. And as I'm walking, I don't know how it happened. I don't know what brought me to this space, but I do remember what I asked for. I asked to be a part of the collective. I asked to do something for others. And in this trip, I find myself conversing with what I can only call colors. And the way that I'm seeing the colors is that they're stacked up like here's a color, and then two colors, and then two colors, and then there's another color. And they create this shape. And I remember intuitively knowing that they had to maintain their distance. It's almost like now I can equate it to the way that the forces of atoms work, to both keep them apart and keep them together, and that if those forces didn't do what they do, then nothing would be happening at all. It would just cancel itself out instantly. And that's exactly what I felt. And I remember having to remind these colors constantly, or maybe just myself, that it has to keep its distance. All of these elements need to keep their distance in order for reality to exist the way it does. I didn't find out until recently that in physics, in mathematics, we show that there are countless vectors and values of reality as it stands, that if they were not that way, then we would not be here. So I get to the park and I'm walking down this path. I don't really know where I'm going. I mean, I do, but I don't. I'm just in a familiar place. I've gone down this path many times. And I'm walking, and every single person I pass is just staring me down, just fucking dogging me. Like, what is that? What? It was like I wasn't even a human being to these people. It was like they felt something, and either they were alarmed or so incredibly curious. It's like if people looked at you like you were actually an alien. And as I'm walking down this path, I'm getting some mixture of memories that don't come from this current life, and information about what is on its way. And I remember, I'll get to that actually. So as I'm walking down, I continuously move into this space with these colors where I'm sort of evolving from having to focus intently on their energy and their distance, and making sure that we're all very clear on what the rules are. It took me like an hour. To find a state of personal balance with what I was experiencing in this trip. That these energies needed to understand each other in a way that I understood in order for all of us to sort of convene. And so I get to the park. Oh wow, I remember that so clearly. I get to one of the parks that's on the path. There are multiple. And cut off into this park where there are these exercise machines. And I decide, after this hour of extremely intense, extremely abstract experience, that I should work out. So I grab these, forget what it was. It was like some shit that didn't have weights. It probably weighed like 15 pounds, but I did it for a while. It was one of those things that you hold up above your head like this. It was a public workout bench. And then there was a sit-up station and a couple other things. Kind of went from place to place. Just did me. I was in some state of finding a mix between comfort and utility, and really just going with the flow. Things really picked up after that. Things really changed. I felt like I went from, a Mercedes-Benz, like, to a fucking Tesla or a Bugatti. And I felt like I was just right pushing halfway down on that gas pedal, going real smooth, real steady. But when you're a Bugatti, my friend, you're flying. You just tap that gas pedal, you're fucking flying. So I'm flying. I get off of these workbenches and I start heading back. I'm not heading home. And I'm sort of resuming this relationship again, because I take a break while I'm working out to just focus on nothing. And I'm resuming this kind of relationship that I have with these colors. It's almost like I'm talking to my chakras, but they're not these chakras. They were different. Maybe the earth chakras. I don't know. I don't know for sure. Right? But I'm walking down this path, and they start talking about ascension. But it's not any ascension. They're talking about what is it going to look like. They're also asking me. They're both giving me the lowdown on what the story looks like now, what we're projecting out into the future at that time. This was August 2018. And then sort of requesting from me, like, okay, so what's your take on that? Now what I'm seeing cities flooded. I'm seeing small groups of people traveling the world alone. I'm seeing small tribes having to come together. I'm seeing myself in a video game store in a desert, and the whole thing is water damaged, and I'm looking at the video games like they're relics. And it was almost like they were showing me a memory of, because if time is repeating, then we would have already gone through this. And that's what they were showing me, was that this is what it looked like the last time we came through here. And then they were just kind of, were like, what about you? What do you have to say? And I remember over and over again going, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. Now, do I know whether or not this is real and this is all going to apply in the future or the past or whatever? No. What I do know is that I know what they showed me, and I know what I felt about it. And so I answered their question honestly. We don't need that. I don't need to see people die underwater and die without awareness, and the survivors, the adapters, have nothing and no one, and all kinds of sad things that I saw that they were showing me. Because see, we talk a lot about great filters of humanity and science, and what they were showing me was that the transition between Age of Pisces and Age of Aquarius is what you would call a great filter, and that the energy levels, the magnetics, the I don't know, the chi, whatever you want to call it, become so high and intense that either you get pushed out or you adapt and you survive. And it's not a physical question. Instead, it's completely a mental, emotional, spiritual question of, can you synthesize and synergize this level of awareness? And so we're going through this. I'm walking down this path. I remember a few very crystal clear synchronicities, totally meaningless in the grand scheme. But it was more like they were showing me, we are in your reality. This is happening. And I'm maybe halfway back to the entrance of this park where the path begins. And I see 3 ladies in blue jeans, in different colored shirts. And they all have strollers. And I remember being tripped out by the fact that these three ladies with strollers and babies wearing blue jeans, and the blue jeans all look the same, and they're just wearing different colored shirts, and they almost look like the same lady, all three of them. I remember thinking in my head, how does that even get set up? How do you even have like a whole trinity of women who wake up or in the middle of the afternoon hit each other up and they're like, yeah, let's all walk with our strollers together. I mean, it's not all that unlikely. But what was weird is that, I see these ladies as I cut on to a straight piece of the path, and as I'm walking down this path, I see this next group. I'm still on this straight cut piece of the path. There's another turn up ahead of me, and behind me there's the turn which I just came from. And these three ladies go around that turn, and they're probably just about to head towards the bridge that I had just crossed. And I'm halfway up the path now. This is like a 45-second gap between these ladies that I saw the first time, and then as I'm coming up to the next corner, these three ladies come around the corner. They're all wearing blue jeans. They all have different colored shirts. They all look fairly the same, and they all have strollers. And I'm looking, and I remember as they walked by, I stopped, I turned around, and I went, what the fuck? And then I just dropped it. I didn't think about it until the next day. I just dropped it there. I had to process somehow, but it was because these entities, beings, energies were somehow not even validating. They were putting it in stone. They were like, this is really happening, buddy. Synchronicity is life. So we continue. I come down the rest of this path, and they're sort of showing me more memories, possibilities, and I'm sort of just working it. I'm working it. That's it. I don't have any direct plans or assumptions. Like right then, I'm not offering up big ideas in the face of this information that I'm being given. I'm just like, okay, we don't need that. And we don't need that. We don't need that. And they're showing me what looks like all previous iterations of this event that's forthcoming. Now, in my mind at the time, I knew it as the event. Now, I know it as a continuous string of events which has always been happening and is still happening, which is in a way peaking here, the sort of crest of a wave, how you say, and that there are many, many intense extreme events to occur in this time. And I was already familiar with all of that. What I wasn't familiar with was, at the time, all these memories of the ways that it supposedly has happened already. So I'm again like, we don't need that, we don't need that, we don't need that. And I'm sort of getting into this space of affirming, I just want to make music. I just want to live. I feel like we all just want to live. And as I continue going through this, it's almost like they have an intuitive apprehension to my argument. But as my argument stops being an argument and starts being a statement, they start taking it as a statement. And the visions change. And as I'm going, I actually remember getting to the end of this path and saying, I need a break. I'm going to take a break. I didn't stop walking. So I get up on to the sidewalk a couple blocks over from where I live, of a pretty busy highway road kind of thing. And I just kind of book it. I'm not booking it, but I'm walking. And I just walk up this road that I've been up tons of times. It's on the way to my work. And I remember the visuals were so clear. I couldn't see anything vibrating. I just felt like a nuclear reactor. I felt like these waves of heat and energy were just pouring out of my heart and out of my mind and my hands. And I'm walking down this road, and I remember I get 3, 4, 5 blocks up. I'm heading up this hill, and I look at the sun. The sun's blood red, and I'm thinking like, wow, it's like the end of the fucking world. It really is. I'm like taking a break from the sincerity of this experience I'm having with these colors, because it's so, how you say, it's like being on the pin point of a needle on your tiptoe, and you just know, if I shift even just a little bit, it's done. So I was just walking, and the way that I would turn to observe things was very different. I was kind of like laying witness, but then I would have no thought outside of that moment where I'm witnessing. I look up at the sun is blood red, thinking, how the fuck? I'm tripping. Like, I've never felt this high up in my life. And the sun is blood red today. And as I'm looking up at the sky, I see a plane. This isn't a regular plane. This is a 2-man plane. This is a front seat, back seat plane. There's a plane that you would see, you know, in the boonies in Connecticut, or the really, I mean, I was on the outer edge of Portland, so it wasn't all that uncommon. But it's one of those 2-seater planes with the two staged wings. And I look over and I see it, the wings are oriented like this. And I'm looking up and I see it, it's like this in comparison to where I'm standing relative. But it's not exactly going forward. It was going like this. Back and forth, like it got caught in a wind so strong that it had no control whatsoever. And the plane was just in the fucking palms of Mother Nature. And I remember looking up there and almost feeling like, I remember thinking like, somebody's in there. And when I thought that, my heart dropped out. And then it kind of came back. And I kept looking, and I was like, oh, just have faith. I have no idea what to make of that. So I get back to walking. And another thing I notice while I'm walking is that I'm flush with understanding of entities that you can't ever see in the physical. It was like the wind was a being, and the sun was a being, and the water was a being, and the earth was a being. But it was like all of earth, like not this earth, but all of the ground, and all of the air, all of the atmosphere, all of everything was alive. But they they had they have different identities and stages of identity that they collapse into one being, but then they also have their own representations as independent sovereign states of being. And as I'm thinking this, the sun seems to be gaining intensity while I think about it. I'm thinking of the sun, and I feel the heat even more, and it almost looks like it's beating down on the ground so hard that the ground is literally glowing gold. Like it would go from regular sunshine to almost like if God walked in the room and everything turned to light, and the sun is just glowing off of every surface. I'm thinking of the wind, and then the wind comes my direction and lifts up all my hair and my clothes and shit. And I'm just kind of taking these as, not even taking them, I'm just knowing them as confirmations every second as I go. So for the rest of this walk, I remember at one point I call my work. I think I wanted to know, I was still in this state of like, I'm taking a break. Let me do something. So I called my work. And I remember I wanted to know if I had to work the next day. I knew I didn't need to call right then, but something told me, go ahead. And what happens is pretty funny. I call. Beep, 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 beep. Like, what the fuck? What? Hang up, call again. Beep, 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 beep. This isn't the first time that my phone has completely malfunctioned while I'm tripping. I call again. Beep, 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 beep. I call again. Beep, 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 beep. I call again, dial tone. I call again, same beeping noise. And I remember later that day I called them and I was like, hey, I called around so-and-so time. I remember I like made a note of it at the time. And I was like, was something going on with the phone? Were you guys on the phone? You have two phones. I work here. Like, our phones are never that busy. I called like 6 times in a row. And the person goes, what? Dude, we were dead today. The phone's barely rung, like at all. And I was like, oh, that's not surprising. So I keep walking, and I have another one of these encounters with a group of people. It's like one after the other that are walking by, and they're all on the other side of the street, and they're going. And one of them's like looking at the other one like, you see this? I just have a... What? I don't know why I keep... It was like they didn't even know why they were staring at me, and they were trying to figure it out. They were like, what? It's like when you see something that you just simply do not understand. You understand that you don't understand it, and you're like, I am dumbfounded. And people kept giving me this dumbfounded look. And after that happens, that's when I go back to this conversation with these colors. And I tell them my verdict is clear, for me at least. I want to make music. I want to live. I want to live a fulfilled life. I want to see love and gratitude, happiness. I want to see people being themselves and enjoying themselves. And suddenly my visions start to change, and I'm feeling the joy and the gratitude, the sheer over-the-top rainbow joy of being the rapper that I want to be and the producer that I want to be, and having the skills that I want, and I'm imagining myself running and being nimble and fast, and you know, having all the mass that I've ever wanted on my body, because of course I've been skinny all my life, and all kinds of other things. And it starts to really pick up here. There's really not a whole lot to put into words, because it becomes this feeling of like, I got through this incredibly intense meeting with these entities. I didn't leave to do it. They were already there. And for the entirety of this experience, I was just walking. And so between this place where I had called, I see these people, then I kind of resume from my break, and I know my verdict, and I'm feeling it, I'm imagining it, I'm dwelling on it, I'm manifesting it. I'm manifesting the joy of, how you say, getting through this event, and it being so much better than I ever could have thought it would be. Because that's what I wanted. I saw all the stuff that they inundated me with, and they're like, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this in the vibrational craw, and that in the vibrational craw, and you need to look at this, and this is also coming, and this is coming, and I'm seeing floods, I'm seeing earthquakes, I'm seeing volcanoes, I'm seeing I'm seeing other dimensions, like the places that I'll go after I die some unexpected horrible death. And I'm just like, we don't need that. And I'm feeling the joy of being old and having gone through all of it, and seeing so many strong souls go through it and come out the other side evolved and skilled and fulfilled and gratified at their work, at their art, because life is art. And then part of the beauty of life is to make art, and you know, it's another form of self-reflection. Life and the body is a form of self-reflection, but then to project it into an art piece is an even further form of self-reflection, and it's really just further and further perpetuations of beauty. Beauty and thankfulness and just love. So it really, at this point, it seems sufficient. It's almost like I'm going through these continuous, like, I'm just feeling what I've projected out, and I know what it is. I don't know implicitly what it looks like. I can't see every vortex, and you know, what's going to happen when the water comes, and how are people going to handle it, and any of that. Instead, I'm just feeling that it's nothing like what it was, and that we make an incredible amount of progress relative to these visions that I had been shown, and that all the beings who were, how you say, in comprehension of themselves, living and prospering, would then do so. So continuously I'm feeling this, and as I walk toward where my work would be, I take a left, and I'm cutting out into this parking lot. And this was a weird one. As I'm cutting out into this parking lot, I pass over these stoops, and I get a very strong deja vu, but it's not any deja vu, it's a vision. And the vision is of me trying to call my friend Sydney. Oh, this gives me chills. I'm trying to call my friend Sydney, and my phone is, the light around my phone, the geometry of it is ripping itself apart, and kind of electrifying, and like dying almost. And I'm trying to call Sydney, and it's like not working at all. And everything about how I feel is just wrong in this vision. But it's not where I am. It's like I'm looking through a window and I'm seeing my past self. And I'm seeing myself calling Sydney, and finally she answers, and all I hear is, what, what did you do? Dylan, what's happening? And it's like, it's as if I'm literally watching the universe get ripped apart, and then I'm falling from it. Like it's an airplane 30,000 feet in the air, and now I'm free falling. And I'm seeing this happen to my past self, but it all happens in the flash. Like in a moment, I see this play out. And I don't stop, I keep walking. And I remember just taking it as, again, confirmation that I'm on a very thin wire and that I need to keep going. So, one of the last crazy things that happens is not the last one. I'm walking toward this park that I'd never been to, but somehow I knew the park was there. I think I saw it on a map or something. And I'd taken another left at the street, going down the street I'd never been down. And of course it feels familiar. And as I go down this hill, and above me are these flagpoles sticking up out of a concrete wall where the top is actually the ground of a parking lot. And then the sidewalk is going down below it next to the road. So it's like the land is cut down, but then there's a parking lot and a building over here, and there's this huge concrete wall foundation kind of thing. And on top of this are these flagpoles, but they're like straight metal poles that curve at the top, and there's flags attached to them. They're almost like advertising flags or something. I don't know what they said. I wasn't looking. But I remember as I pass the first one, I hear, and I look up and I see that the first pole has moved towards me and then smacked into the fence. Like hard enough that I immediately notice. And then I look down and I hear one move again as I'm walking toward it. And it smacks the fence. And I'm like, what? And I keep walking. And the third one comes toward me and then smacks the fence. And I remember thinking, well before this happened, that something was going on with my energy and that I was way more magnetic than I had bargained for, and that I needed to be careful. And I remember seeing this and thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna keep walking. So I walked to this park, go into the bathroom. I remember looking in the mirror. I look at everything and I notice I am in the motherfucking fifth dimension. I look in the mirror and the motherfucker is a portal. I look at me and it's a different version of me, and it's almost like telling me like, oh yeah, you could end up anywhere right now. You better focus. So I just knew I had to piss. So I piss. It's the most intensely amazing piss I've ever taken. And I head outside. And I'm looking around and I'm just getting all these memories. And what it feels like is I'm seeing myself having gone to this park after having that crazy thing happen with Sydney in my past life. And I'm at this park and all the reality is just melting away. And my entire body is becoming disconnected from the physical reality. And it's weird because it's not actually happening in my life. It's like I'm getting a vision of when it did happen, and I'm using it as sort of a guide to show me what not to do. So when I go outside and I see these strange visions of what looks like me literally losing my grip and falling through this strange interdimensional space where it seems like you could end up anywhere. I immediately look outside, see all that, and I'm like, out of here. So I start walking back, and I basically rewind. As I walk back home, I rewind over everything that I've been through. I'm doing the whole routine. As I pass back through that parking lot, I didn't notice the flagpoles again. I just maybe something about my energy changed, or maybe it was the wind and it was a synchronicity. I don't know, but I didn't notice them again. What I did notice was when I went back through that parking lot, I saw that vision of myself again, even more clearly, to the point where I stopped and I looked down at the stoop and I could feel myself sitting on this stoop, hunched over, looking at my phone, freaking out like, oh my God, I'm dying. This is it. We're all gonna die. Ah! And I'm freaking out. And I remember like kind of chuckling, and every hair on my body stood up. Right now, every hair on my body is standing up. And I chuckled and I just kept walking. I was like, definitely not gonna call Sydney. I knew that. I'm like, definitely not gonna call homegirl. Definitely not gonna do that. Just gonna keep walking. So this is probably, out of all the things, because all the other things, they're not falsifiable. I can't prove that any of that happened to you. But what I can say is that when I got to my apartment, I remember looking around, looking at the cars, and feeling like they could potentially like start flying up off the ground, and it was like every still car I saw, the wheels looked like they were moving, like spinning for real. And I kept seeing this and seeing the way people were acting. Everybody was acting extremely strange, very strange. People were cruising much slower down the road than they normally do. There were more people outside than I was used to. Just everything about it was just out of the ordinary. And I get to my apartment, I cut into the parking lot entrance. There's multiple entrances. Parking lot entrance. So there's my building, and then there's another building here and another building. There's a parking lot, and then around the corner is the road, and here I am on the road, and I sit on the curb, and I remember seeing this cat that I always see. I'm talking to the cat. I'm like talking through my mind, but I'm talking out loud. And it's almost as if the more strongly I feel my words, the more strongly I feel them through my mind, and the more strongly I can project them as an energy. So I see the cat looks at me, but the cat never wants to talk or never wants to look at me and never wants to hang out. This cat just kind of like stared at me like, yo. And I remember smiling, and I was like, just remember to love yourself, bro. That's all I can say. Just remember to love yourself. Because it felt like the cat, it actually was giving me not just a very complacent look, but then also a look of like, do you understand me right now? And I'm standing there and I'm talking to it like kind of objectively, like, just remember to love yourself, dude. I'm just tripping nuts, and I'm so deep in this energy and the idea of ascension. In my mind, everybody is ascending right now. Like at this point in the trip, I had already sort of integrated all this stuff happening with the colors. I had basically forgotten at this point that it even happened. Same thing with the poles and what happened at the bathroom. I had just completely forgotten. I didn't even care. There was too much to process. And when I get home, I'm sitting on this curb, I'm looking around, I'm feeling like today's the day. This is the event. Everybody's ascending right now, and I have to do something. And so in my mind, I'm talking, I'm looking out at the sky, and I'm thinking that like my voice is somehow like projecting down from the sky, like there's a megaphone in the sky, and I'm like almost giving an announcement like, just be calm. control your thoughts. And I'm really like, I'm at this point probably starting to come down from the authenticity of the rest of the trip. And I remember kind of talking for a while, and I think I'm really just amusing myself. Probably my ego finally gets the best of me at this point. But I come back from that too, and I'm just kind of like, I just kind of sat there and breathed in, and part of me was like, yeah, that sounded a little ridiculous. And so I kind of just brushed it off, was like, whatever, I'm just not gonna move in that direction. And this all happens in the span of 2 or 3 minutes. And then I look over, and right next to me, this is what I'm talking about when I say the rest is not falsifiable, but there is something that happened in this trip that I'll never forget. I look over, and there's all this commotion going on in the parking lot. And of course I'm like, oh, the energy is just incredibly high right now. These people are probably wondering what the fuck is going on. And I didn't give it much thought. It didn't register to me that there were like 4 or 5 emergency vehicles right there. And I had this strange feeling like something was bugging out in the air. It was almost like I could see the color of it too, but I couldn't see it in any way that would indicate to me what it was. But it was like something glitching or bugging out in the air. And immediately I hear something in like a telepathic communication or thought. It's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, did I just do something wrong? What did I just do? I don't know what I just did. Did I do something wrong? And it keeps doing that. And it's like, oh my God, what did I just do? Did I do something wrong? I don't know what just happened. Did I do something wrong? And what I'm seeing in my mind is a man that just killed himself, gun in his mouth. And he, in that very, very last millisecond, changed his mind. But he was dead. And I didn't like fully register all of that. My immediate response was, if your desire is to live, then move to your next life right now and take it as a lesson, because you can't come back now. It's too late. And he was just gone. That was it. He was gone. And it didn't occur to me until I was sitting there for maybe like 20, 30 minutes smoking cigarette after cigarette, because I hadn't smoked a single cigarette in all the time that I have been walking. And I was very stressed out. I was extremely stressed out. The stress didn't go anywhere. I was just handling it very well. And I remember I get up and I walk towards my apartment. And I almost walked up to these people because I'm thinking, oh, there's just so much going on with the earth right now that obviously these people are all outside. Something must have happened. It has something to do with the ascension, whatever. And I'm thinking like, I should go talk to these people and maybe help them, kind of clear shit up. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm Jesus or something. And I look over and all I see is I see 2 cops. And I see three fucking ambulances. Or maybe it was 2. I don't know. But I was tripping out. I was bugging out. I was freaking out. Because when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute. 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 And it occurred to me that months before that happened, the cops came to my neighbor's apartment, and I had been asking for a while, like, this is such a peaceful area. I'm really curious about what could have happened over there. Is it domestic? What is it? And eventually, it comes down to grapevine between all the people in the apartments that the dude, that his family called the cops on him because they found out that he had a gun, and that they were afraid that he was going to kill himself. And And when I remembered that, and I saw the cops and the EMTs speaking to people outside, and I saw more cops pulling in, and it looked like possibly forensics or something, that man almost definitely was the same man that I felt bugging out in the air, who I saw with a gun in his mouth. And I think I cried for a while that night about it, but I had a lot more to think about too. And so probably that, and when I go inside, I had this habit of looking at earthquakes and hurricanes to see how the earth reflected what I was experiencing about the earth, because I wanted to know how accurate is my observation. And I find out that in the last 2 days, almost every point in the ring of fire had gone off. And that morning, August 21st, if I remember right, August 21st, 2018, there was, I think, a 5 again. I had never been so dumbfounded in my entire life. I mean, I was actually pretty much as equally dumbfounded as I was at the DMT trip and everything else, but I was fucking dumbfounded. And I remember that was a night that I started vibrating uncontrollably. I had to quit smoking weed and dabs because they would just make it worse. And I wasn't sure where everything was headed with all that vibrating. And the truth was that I needed more time to step back and integrate and observe the process and really do it in a sober mind. Because at the time, in the last 8 months leading up to that, I had just been like one after the other, like one transformation after the other. And if you had known me in 2017 or 2016, you would be absolutely dumbfounded as to the person that I've morphed into in such a short amount of time. But especially between 2017 and 2018, I was running like the fucking wind, and I couldn't seem to process further what was going on. The last thing that happened that night, well after I came down, I believe, was among the stranger things that I've seen. But it wasn't all that weird. I remember laughing, and I tried to take a picture, but when I pulled out my phone, by the time I did, you couldn't distinguish it between like a star with the shaking of the phone. But I go outside on my porch after I had called my mother, and I was like, I'm moving back. Oregon's about to fall. Oregon's about to fall off the fucking continental shelf. Like, I'm moving back, like, right now. It's a good thing I did, because my living situation was in fact falling apart right before my eyes, and I was not willing to accept that. And if I hadn't made that choice to move with such vigor and really like paranoia, to do it so immediately, I would have had to spend money on my rent and rent for my roommate, and I probably would have ended up homeless and unable to make my ticket back, or it just would have been worse trying to get back. And I also found much better work right when I came back to the East Coast. And of course, I'm, splitting the rent with my mother now that I've come back, rather than just living with my mother. And I'm working, at real restaurants now instead of fucking Taco Bell. So it was definitely a purposeful synchronicity that I had to move, and those alarm bells really did assist me in getting myself to move. But I remember looking up after I had called my mother, and I was like, fucking ring of fire just went off like 30 times, and the Oregon coast shook this morning, and you have no idea what I saw today. And I fucking, there's the man in the other building killed himself, and I'm like going off. I had forgotten half of my trip already. And after this, I remember smoking, and I'm looking up at the sky, my back porch, and a big old ball of light just fucking zooms in out of nowhere. And it just kind of like moves around and then moves up, and it stops. And I'm like looking at it so intensely, both my hands, and I'm like, why? Why would you do this to me now? Right now, when I'm this stressed, and you're gonna add something else to my fucking mind for me to fucking look at and trip out about. And I'm looking at this light, and like as I'm doing that, and finally when I get the courage to pull up my phone and get like maybe a half second of footage of this thing, it disappears. That was one of the few times that I actually saw a light in the sky. I'd seen saucers in. It's a long story. Around the same time that Oregon had F-150s flying over it looking for unidentified flying objects, I saw 3 perfectly saucer-shaped clouds that were connected to each other, and they were floating by at maybe an elevation of like 800 feet. And 5 minutes before that, those F-150s had actually flown directly over my apartment at the exact same altitude. And this was the first time in my life that I saw what looked like a light being in the sky. And I was like, why don't you just come down and talk? Like, what, are you messing with me? I just had the weirdest reaction to the fact that this motherfucking thing was like just kind of hovering out in orbit or in the atmosphere or whatever the fuck it was. But yeah, that's a long trip report, but it's a well justified hour and 12 minutes to explain everything that led up to it, what happened, what it meant, how long it took me to integrate, and why I had to quit psychedelics and weed for nearly a year. I didn't build up the courage to start smoking weed and meditating again until my grandfather died, and I felt like, I don't know why the fuck I'm wasting time. And that was the next year. But yeah, it's a lot. Life is a lot. You want to talk about psychedelics? Everybody wants to talk about, hyperspace and multidimensional jesters and all this stuff, but my trips were never like that, man. My trips were always very real world, and I always had a very intense, set purpose of every single trip and what I wanted to accomplish, and I would always get there and go further. And I've maintained that pattern through my sober life, through training. And I want this video to be a message of that. My skin, my eyes, my eyebrows, my hair, my body, my frame, my posture, my voice, my ability to articulate everything has evolved 1,000 times over in progression since then and since the year before that. Anybody who's known me in those years before that would absolutely corroborate. My life changed instantaneously over and over and over again, and I did it on purpose. And even after all of that with the psychedelics, this past, 9 to 11 months, I have been rigorously doing hatha yoga and yoga of the mind all the time, all day, turning all of my activities into meditation. And let me tell you, it is life-changing. And all this stuff about entities and jesters and hallways, You see it in your dreams. If you can just get there lucidly, it just happens naturally. That's why a lot of people say you don't need to take drugs to open up yourself. You don't. But they're not drugs. They're medicine. Peace.